Welcome to Chess Focus. Today we'll explore the George defense, one of the opening traps for black, with an impressive 82% win rate. This defense is particularly effective against white's pawn opening to d4. Let's get started. White opens with the pawn to e4. Black responds with a6. Wow, what an unusual move, right? This is one of the less common opening moves for black. A6 is not popular because, as you know, black typically aims to either directly control the center or exert pressure on it from a distance. So, black plays a6, and now we'll see how the game unfolds. If black doesn't immediately challenge the center, white will push both pawns to d4 and e4, securing full control of the center as quickly as possible. This pawn duo dominates not only the central squares, but also the extended center. In response, black might proceed with c6. A common continuation from here is white developing the knight to f3. This move accelerates white's ability to castle early and enhances control of the center. At this point, black responds with the pawn to d5. This move immediately puts direct pressure on white's pawn at e4. Now, white is forced to address this challenge with one of three options: capturing the pawn, pushing forward, or defending it. One of the most popular responses for white is to push the pawn forward. By advancing the pawn, white gains more space and temporarily restricts black's knight from jumping to f6. If black tries to place the knight on h6, it can be captured by white's bishop, and if it moves to f6, the pawn will take it. This scenario causes significant delays for black's development. So, how does black address this situation? Black's first priority should be to develop the bishop to c8 as quickly as possible. This is because black's next critical move must involve advancing the pawn to e6. Without pushing e6, black's knight cannot develop to e7. Nor can it advance to g6 or f5. Additionally, the e6 pawn move clears the way for black's bishop. This sequence is essential for black to maintain a solid position. Following this, black develops the bishop to g4, applying pressure to white's knight on f3. In response, white plays bishop to e2, which not only develops the piece, but also sets up for an early castle. Now, black plays e6, building a solid structure and opening pathways for the bishop and knight. White, prioritizing king safety, castles early. Black then pushes the pawn to c5. The idea behind this move is clear. Since white has advanced their pawns aggressively, black must immediately put pressure on the central pawn structure. By attacking the d4 pawn, black indirectly weakens the e5 pawn, which would become highly vulnerable if d4 falls. Naturally, white won't allow the d4 pawn to be easily attacked. White responds by pushing the pawn to c3, reinforcing the defense of d4. If black captures on d4, white will recapture with the c3 pawn, maintaining a strong grip on the e5 pawn. At this stage, the central challenge for black becomes clear. Black can only gain a significant advantage by breaking white's central pawn duo. This is the core idea of the George defense. Next, black develops the knight to c6, intensifying the pressure on the d4 pawn. However, as you can see, white still has the knight on f3, defending both d4 and e5. What is black's next idea? Black needs to exchange the bishop for the knight to weaken white's central control. Black captures the knight with the bishop, and white recaptures with their bishop. Now that the f3 knight is gone, black can exploit white's central pawn duo as follows. Black captures a pawn, and white recaptures. At this stage, black has two main attacking ideas. 1. Queen to b6. This move puts pressure on the d4 pawn. 2. Knight to e7, followed by maneuvering to f5 to attack d4. Let's first analyze the move queen to b6. With this, white's most reliable defense is to move the bishop to protect the d4 pawn. However, if white plays bishop to e3 to defend d4, black can immediately capture the b2 pawn, putting the rook under threat. If black commits to the queen b6 plan, They can even capture d4 outright. Now, let's examine the second plan, knight to e7, which I personally find more intriguing. After knight to e7, white develops their knight to c3. Black continues with knight to f5, applying pressure on d4. White is almost compelled to play bishop to e3 to defend d4. In this case, hold off on capturing the e3 bishop with the knight. Maintain the tension. Here's why. White's bishop on e3 is weak. It functions more like an advanced pawn. It is solely focused on defending d4 and poses no active threat to black. So what should black do next? Instead of attacking immediately, black develops the bishop to e7, preparing to castle early. White then plays a3, likely to stop black's bishop and knight from advancing. Black castles. White continues with b4, aiming to claim more space on the queen's side. In this position, we notice that white's bishop on e3 is defending the pawns, making it a focal point for black to exploit. The center, particularly the e3 and d4 squares, are the primary weaknesses in white's position. Instead of capturing the e3 bishop outright, black should consider developing their bishop to g5, targeting these weak points. The bishop on e3 is only protected by a single pawn, which can be exploited. When white moves their queen to d2, black captures the e3 bishop. White recaptures with the pawn, and then black plays queen to g5, intensifying the attack on e3. This is white's biggest weakness. To defend, white may bring their rook into play, but at this point, black captures on d4 with the knight. White's e4 pawn cannot recapture the d4 knight because it is pinned against the queen. By successfully attacking white's central pawns, black gains a decisive advantage. If white's queen can't capture, and the e4 pawn can't take the knight, white is bound to lose the e5 pawn in the next move or shortly thereafter. Now, let's explore an alternative scenario. What if white plays c4? Black should respond in a similar fashion by pushing the pawn to d5. If white captures on d5, black recaptures. Should white take the pawn again, black recaptures with the queen, leaving white with an isolated pawn on d4. To avoid this, white might push e5 instead, attempting to restrict black's knight development and exert pressure on the center. Black counters by developing the knight to c6. White continues with knight to f3, and black develops the bishop to g4. This sequence supports black's pawn push to e6, a key move in this structure. White may respond with bishop to e2, followed by black's e6. This setup grants black an open c-file and positions the queen for a potential move to b6, threatening the central squares. This structure forms the foundation of black's long-term attacking plan. Thank you all for watching the video. Please leave a like to support Chess Focus, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, make sure to hit the subscribe button and click the bell so that you'll be notified as soon as Chess Focus releases new videos. Goodbye, and see you again soon.